Welcome to the BLUF, or the bottom line up front, with the FBI AIA. Today we have one of our AIA members with us, Dave Johnson. So Dave, what's the BLUF for today's session?
Oh man. Okay. The biggest takeaway, and I had to write this down and revise it, but is that your analytical skills that you bring from the government are super valuable in the private sector. But to be successful in the transition, you need to kind of undergo constant reinvention and figure out pivot points where you can take advantage of something new to learn, a new technology that grabs you that is applicable to the business world.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today, Dave. My name is Sierra Karcher, and I'm the COO of the FBI Association of Intelligence Analysts. By way of background, the FBI AIA was formed in late 2021 by a small group of former FBI analysts who sought to build a community to advance the careers of intelligence analysts in the private sector and government through mentoring, networking, advocacy, and programming like the BLUF series. So we're really excited to have you, Dave. Your career trajectory has been super interesting to watch. And as someone who left the government for the private sector cyber threat intelligence industry, I was just really, really thrilled that you agreed to join us on this episode and really share your insights, your journey, what you've been through, regardless of whether or not people want to go into cyber threat intelligence or want to go elsewhere. I think your advice and your BLUF is going to be very, very valuable. So we got through the BLUF, which in the spirit of this series, we like to do that. But let's open it up back to you, Dave, to give a more proper intro of yourself.
Okay. Yeah, so I can go really far back, but I don't really want to because I think a lot of people don't care. So I always think like an analyst, like think about your stakeholder. What do you guys care about? But I think some of my journey began sort of like getting out of college, and I got a psychology degree, which seems kind of ludicrous. Like, is that going to be useful? But then, like, to get to the FBI, actually learned how to use the statistics software really well in undergrad. I took an experimental psychology course and learned this software, and then I got an internship at the behavioral science unit in Quantico and did some really cool research. And uh, and then I kind of learned a lesson in that. It's like sort of looking, being curious about stuff and really learning when to pivot into something. And so like sort of letting your curiosity grab you. So yeah, so long story short, I got in through a psychology degree, which is kind of weird. Like I didn't think it was useful at the time, but then I picked up computer skills and became an SOS, a staff operations specialist. And I did that for a bit and transitioned into an intelligence analyst working out of Wisconsin, which again doesn't seem super cool, but but in cyberspace, there's interesting things that happen regardless of state boundaries. It didn't matter. We had some really cool cases at the time. But yeah, so the FBI experience was really, really cool. I focused really on um, like criminal violations at first, all criminal stuff as an SOS, as a staff operations specialist. And then as an IA, I got tracked to cyber, and I worked mostly cyber criminal. We had an analyst who worked child porn and got super burned out on that and kind of stepped into those shoes, but then learned I can kind of pivot into other things that I thought were interesting, like APT groups, Russia, China. Even the criminal stuff was pretty amazing at the time. Yeah, so I'm going a little bit long, but the FBI was great. I loved it. I would have stayed there forever if I could. But then life didn't really deal me those cards directly. So my wife had an opportunity to go to Mayo Clinic. She's a doctor. And for me to let her do that, I kind of had to say goodbye to the government. And the transition was pretty intense. I was having my first kid and buying a house in another state, and both like new chapters in our lives. So it was probably the most stressful part of my life at that point. Yeah, and then there's lots of things I did along the way, but that staying curious, learning, adapting, reinventing myself took me to a lot of good places. So I went from FBI to RSM, which is a consulting firm. And then I went into startup mode and I joined Feedly. I work at Feedly right now. And along the way, I started an LLC where I make apps and things like that that interest me, and I can keep my technical skills sharp.
What is the name of your LLC website so people can kind of venture there
Yeah.
if they're interested?
Thanks for asking. It's Junbi, Junbi LLC. And I just put up a new website for something I rolled out today. I actually had a webinar earlier today about this thing I put out. It's called FlowViz. Flowviz.io is the website for this, and it's for threat intelligence. It takes threat intelligence reports and then makes cool visuals from them. So you can like really, it's kind of like automated link node charts that we all loved in government. It was kind of funny. I really liked link node charts and diagramming in government, and then I got into private sector, and no one had that same passion that I did. So it's my way to like bring that.
I love that. I will make sure for our listeners that those links are available in the caption of this recording. But so we are recording in August 2025. Um, I joined the Bureau in September 2009, and I really started getting into the Bureau's cyber mission by late 2012. And it pretty much, I had like 3 years to do other things in the Bureau. And then as soon as I got the cyber itch, the cyber bug, it never went away. So like here I am, 13 years later, still passionate about cyber threat actor work. So, what years were you doing this work?
Yeah.
Because I think our listeners will really appreciate the timing that you were intersecting with FBI cyber cases.
Yeah. It was really similar time period. 2009, I got in as an SOS, and I think 2011 is when I transitioned to IA. It was like the fall of '09, I remember. But yeah, and then I got out mid 2016, before Trump got in office. So I remember that as like milestone in my head.
Yeah. Anytime there's a changing of the guard and changing of, priorities in some senses, I definitely can agree with those markers. But definitely an interesting time to be working in FBI cyber. I would characterize them as not the beginning years because cyber was being done for a bit, but I kind of view those as the early-ish prime years of
Yeah.
when cyber division was really forming and coalescing. And I was formally in cyber division starting, I think, in 2014, 2013.
Okay.
Um, so had a view into the evolving demands of the cyber work and how it was growing as a division over time. So fast forward, here we are in 2025, and a lot has changed. The cyber threat landscape has certainly changed, but I just love that you were like in it during those years because you have such valuable knowledge about the cyber threat landscape back then and what it's looking like now, and probably some really great insights into where it's heading based on what you've seen since government and what you're building now with Feedly. So, very, very exciting. I don't want to spend too much time talking about like the cyber cases, and we're not here. This isn't like an FBI cyber case review. If there is a desire for that, we can probably pitch that to a couple of different people to see if we can support that. But I do have some questions about your journey. So you talked about, all of the life things happening at once
Mhm.
when you made this transition. What was the pivot like from the perspective of someone having to switch mindsets, gears,
Yeah.
organizations very, very quickly to the private sector with a lot of other things going on in the background?
Yeah, it was really dicey. I mean, that was one of the times where I was pretty desperate, but in all honesty, I have been contingency planning before I even left. Sometimes you smell blood in the water,
Yeah,
or like I think as a good analyst, you always like think of a backup plan, or you even like apply your analysis mindset to yourself.
yeah,
Like, well, what would you pivot into? What can I start doing today? And so like I did a lot of prep work beforehand. I tried to crank out SANS courses as much as I could. I tortured myself. So in case you don't know what that is, those are pretty expensive security courses to take. And I didn't feel guilty because lots of other people are taking those courses and I was applying it at work. But it definitely like used the opportunity to train. And so I'll get into advice stuff later. It's not necessarily needed to be talked about now. But the transition was sort of like a preparation in the works already. But at the time, it was intense. It was a crucible. So I remembered I went into this job site I knew about, Ninja Jobs, and actually learned about this from a coworker who was in cyber division who knew like the founder of it. It's like a special job hunting website for technical people, for security people. I thought, oh, I'll just put some, reach out for some interviews and not knowing at all how my job lines up to private sector. I was looking for CTI analyst, like anything like that, threat analyst. And then what I found out is people don't know what intelligence analysis really is. A lot of people don't. Like analysis to some people is just summarizing news. And like, no, that's not what I signed up for, or doing malware analysis. And that was something I was training to do, but I didn't get very far in it. And like, well, I can't really do that. So the transition was tricky because I really tried to find something that aligned with my skill set. Like I've done these things, right? And so I got lucky because I did find someone who I think was trained by a former CIA analyst at the energy sector, and he was the director of this company I decided to go with. And he understood what PIRs were, what Intel requirements were, and like, whew, this is great. I think a big thing for me was like learning to interview them to make sure that they know what Intel is so that I don't step into something where, I won't last, 2 months. Um, and there's a lot of other things too. Um, like with a three-letter agency behind your name, people think you're like privy to secrets, that you have special access to information. And they also want to show you around a lot too. Like, oh, this is Dave from the FBI. Like, tell us about what you did with this. I'm like, well, I'm thinking I was involved in like 1% of that, whatever that thing is. It's something to deal with a little bit. But that's after you get in, and it kind of never goes away. Wherever you go, people are really interested in the three-letter agency background. And for me now, um, it's more of a footnote than anything because I think if you transition properly going forward, you're learning about new things to get into, to get really good at because you got into the agency with those skills already, that aptitude. And so just keeping that intensity, I think, helped me kind of separate myself from it. It was 2000, almost 9 years ago. Um, yeah, there's more.
Yeah.
I could talk.
No, I think that is super helpful. And what I really appreciate is you put this in the context of your whole self. Like, this is not an event that is limited to how do I translate my IA skills to these technical skills for this industry. There is a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that we have to offer. Um, I also love that you basically aligned what your career management looks like through the intelligence cycle. And we actually talk about that in the first episode of this series with Nicole Menkoff. Like, if you had to basically, your key intelligence question is, how do I evolve Dave's career? What's next? What can we see on the horizon? And if you put your intelligence analyst mindset in and go through all of the phases of the intelligence cycle, what would that actually look like? So I really love that. And I think the key here that you brought up is reinvention. I think it's so important for people to build up the capacity to be dynamic and resilient and be able to reinvent themselves when they need to or when they want to. So I want to kind of dig into that a little bit more because I feel like it's easier said than done. And I feel like it's something that people really struggle with, especially if they're holding on to the three-letter mission and the three-letter life had too tightly. I feel like that can sometimes make reinvention more difficult. And I know I'm talking a lot right now, but like it really resonated with me that that whole part of your life is now a footnote, and that's not a bad thing. It just means that you've moved on, and they join a footnote of other footnotes for a very long and rich and rewarding career. So I would love to hear, what you can share about how to reinvent yourself, especially in the context of I need to leave the government and do something else right now.
Yeah. Um, so I have to keep in mind that not everyone wants to do what I did and like learn technical skills. And like I got really into coding and computers. That helped me a lot. But when I was at the FBI, I started off as a horrible briefer. And I know people had a technical app or not technical aptitude, but people have ranges of skills and abilities and things that they're interested in. And so I think my biggest advice is really to really do some introspection and think about what what keeps you curious, what's interesting to you, and make a list of those things. It could be a piece of software, it could be teaching, but really it's sort of like aligning what interests you with business needs. So like that intersection, I think, is really important because I mean, lots of things can interest you. I mean, horseback riding can interest you, right? But you can't like do that. That's not a transition plan. So for me, it was like my second pivot point. I got into computers, and I think the CISO was interested in signing someone up for some AI course. This is back in 2019. And then everyone was scared to death of it. They didn't want to do it. I said, "Oh, I'll do it. That's fine. I'm interested." I had no idea what I was getting into. And so maybe even like I was curious, but also a little bit terrified because it was like learning calculus for some of the course modules. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do to myself? So, I mean, it's kind of like looking at that intersection of curiosity and business need and recognizing and keeping on top of like trends. Like you're an analyst, you're constantly digesting the news, new technology, new things that businesses are pivoting into. Look at that and key in on what things are interesting to you. What does the government offer that aligns with those things? So I think that's my biggest piece of advice.
So I really enjoyed hearing about your discomfort and being okay with that. And I think that's really the key, especially if you're pivoting into any kind of field where there's great disruptions happening. And I think with AI, no industry is immune from disruptions right now. I think each industry is grappling with, sector specific disruptions, but then the added layer of how is AI changing the back end or front end of the landscape of my industry.
Yeah.
Um, so good for you to get it for getting in on that training 6 years ago. And now I feel like everyone is fighting to get into the best training for AI right now.
Hmm.
But I'm going to ask you a question that comes up in the cyber threat intelligence field a lot, and that is how technical do you really need to be successful? And I guess I'm doing what I'm not supposed to do in interviews. I'm going to slam three questions in rapid succession.
Okay.
But how do you define technical skills?
Interesting. Okay. So is for CTI, right?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
technical do you need to be for CTI?
And then what does technical actually mean in CTI?
You could always be more technical. You'll never learn enough. And so I think if you know how to think, it's more important, and you have the curiosity and aptitude, that's all you need to start with, because everything can be learned at that point. I started off as a staff operations specialist, SOS, and then they said, "Hey, can you write this Python script to help with the botnet investigation?" Like, sure, I'll do that. I have no idea. I tried it. Um, and so like yeah, I was interested. And I think that the key thing is like having that analytical mindset, know your audience, like the very basics I think are needed. But if you're not interested in the technical stuff at all, you probably are not going to do well. So it's that interest. I think that helps like hone things in.
I love it. I guess to the second part of the question, what are the different ways that you can be technical in the CTI field?
Interesting. Yeah. So there's lots of branches, just like, CTI has branches, security has branches. You can be really good at malware analysis, for example, reverse engineering. I think I was interested in it at one point, and then I learned I was not interested in it.
Trial by fire.
Yeah.
You know
I
very quickly if you're going to enjoy reverse
mean,
engineering something or not.
yeah, I signed up for like an assembly language class, and then I realized like I really don't want to spend time doing this. It's not fun for me. So I'm like, I'm not going to be that kind of a technical analyst, but it'd be great, a case agent at the time brings you as an analyst who knows how to, look at malware, you're looking at a server, great. But that wasn't for me. I think uh what was the question again? It was
The different types of
different types of
technical.
technical.
Sorry, this was not on our list of questions.
Yeah, yeah. I think from an investigative standpoint, and I don't think this is unique to the FBI, but like really being able to research well and find the important details and learning how to connect dots, that is even more important, I think. You can be a really good malware analyst and miss like super obvious or important things. But I think the people I've been impressed with the most working in both FBI and private sector were the people who found patterns and connections between things that everyone else missed. And to me, like that's technical competence right there. Um, it takes practice, and some people have aptitude, but I think for me, anything can be learned.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I see a lot of the same. And that's kind of why I asked the question, because I feel like really being a good analyst, an intelligence analyst, is a technical skill in of itself. And the more that you can develop range in that capability, the better off you will be. So I kind of put it out as like a love letter to generalists. Like, it's so wonderful to have really deep subject matter expertise in one thing, especially if that's your passion.
Mm.
I am so jealous of people that are just they're fluent in tracking adversaries on network infrastructure. I am so happy that they can do that and they love doing that and they are specialists in that. Um, I can't do that. I can't reverse engineer either.
Yeah.
So I really see a lot of value in building intelligence teams that pull those skill sets together and knowing that the technical spectrum in intelligence, especially in cyber threat intelligence, it is a spectrum, but there's a lot of value, and the full picture is really only possible if you're bringing teams and skill sets together that complement each other.
Right. Yep, 100% agree. I remember when I was a manager in private sector, I had to hire people, and I like purposely picked people who thought differently and different skills. There's, I think, a little bit of conflict in my approach because I think one person wanted me to hire basically clones of one person. But then
Yep.
it doesn't work that way. You can't, all-star teams sometimes don't work well. All the best players clash, or maybe they're too single-minded in one approach.
Yeah, and that gets back to the classic intelligence analyst, I think, pillar of bias and critical thinking and multiple perspectives. The same thing, if you apply that thinking to an intelligence question or problem, that's one thing, but you also have to apply that to the intelligence team and the problems that you're trying to solve for a company as well. And that gets back to your original point about educating companies about what intelligence is.
Mhm.
And that's something that I feel like is a perennial issue. It's just, especially with artificial intelligence now, I'm seeing a lot of confluence of people talking about intelligence and intelligence practices. And I need to stop and say, wait, are you talking about applying artificial intelligence to your business? Or are you talking about applying intelligence practices to your business, or both? And let's just be a little specific and appreciate that there is an exciting pathway to do both. But yeah, that's just my aside for that.
Yeah, it's hard. I actually talked to my old team, and I remember when turnaround times too for Intel products were like 2 weeks. And then now with AI and intelligence analysis, then the turnaround times are expected much quicker, go super deep, super fast. And it's really hard to hit on all those things well. So,
Yeah, exactly. We are definitely in an exciting time where we're trying to figure out how to integrate these types of tools and techniques into our toolboxes as intelligence analysts to scale our expertise, make things more efficient, but also not undercut our own processes for rigorous tradecraft at the
mhm.
expense of speed and necessity. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to reflect on this episode in 10 years.
I mean, 2025 is much different than when I started with the Bureau, tell you that. Um,
Yeah.
I think in 2013 or 14 that the APT-1 report came out. MITRE
Mm-hmm.
ATT&CK wasn't even in existence, or it was just starting out. There's no
Mm-hmm.
framework. And now you have these things. And now
Mm-hmm.
you have AI, and you have MCP servers that do everything for you, right? And what's the role of an analyst today? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that could be like a separate topic that you dive into for an hour, but it's a crazy day and age we live in.
So, along those lines, and for people looking to transition to cyber threat intelligence or other intelligence roles or equivalents, or translations of intelligence in the private sector, how important is it for them, in your opinion, to pursue AI skills?
I think it's absolutely important. Um, I mean, like, why shoot yourself in the foot by just failing to acknowledge like a really strong and prominent trend? Like, it's like trying to, I don't want to use the internet. It's too scary. I don't want to use a mobile phone. These are tools to enable you to do, better things. It just how you apply those tools correctly and in the best way, I think, is where you can maybe learn from other people, use a class, play with it yourself. So yeah, definitely like embrace new technology, but don't over rely on it. Because I know people who have, I don't know, like the whole meme of writing an email with AI and then someone reading it with AI. So like no one's actually communicating with each other anymore. My fear is that we over rely on AI to handle a lot of our thinking. And which is scary because deep fakes, I mean, you open Instagram, like 99% of the posts I feel like are AI generated. So we need like critical thinking more than ever, and we can't really outsource that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I really appreciate that. So, for our listeners, if you had any additional advice to share about the transition or the job search or reinvention, what else can you share?
Yeah. I think one that gets overlooked quite a bit is LinkedIn. I avoided it like all social media when I was in government. But I remember I went to a conference one time. This was after I transitioned into private sector, and a guy asked me like, "Oh, what's your LinkedIn?" We had a really good conversation, and I said, "Well, I don't have one." He's like, "Oh, that's a big mistake. You should really get one." And he was right. Like, uh, it really helps, and I I hate to say it, but it does kind of help to put like former FBI in your header. You might think it's really bad OPSEC. It is a little bit, right? Depends on like what you're known for. But in some cases, if you're really struggling to find something that's interesting, it can open doors. For me, it doesn't really matter. People have different tolerances for their exposure and their OPSEC, but consider it at least as an advantage that you can play. Um, let's see what else. Stay sharp through curiosity as the underlying th the whole current of this thing is like follow your curiosity, your obsession, and see where that lines up with business need and start early. I think those are things that I just want to underscore again. Another thing is conferences. So if you work in a certain field in intelligence, usually there's conferences or something. But definitely take advantage of that when you're in private sector. Um, you can even leverage a lot of contacts from your former government days when you transition over, and it just gets you introduced to more people. So that networking part is kind of a foreign concept a little bit in government because we're so like um, secretive and conscious with OPSEC, but it's something you really need to reconsider once you go into private. Um, see what else. I did take some notes here.
Yeah, no worries. I'll while you're reviewing, I did want to emphasize the conference piece a little bit. So I think that is really, really helpful advice. And I also think that there is a lot that former government analysts can contribute into the intelligence space through conferences because, to your point, a lot of those analysts haven't had a chance to weigh in and tell their stories, or at least give their insights with the totality of their knowledge and tradecraft training. So I feel like more and more intelligence or I should say more and more opportunities to share intelligence topics at conferences are increasingly, they just keep coming up, and I think we need um, more speakers and more thought leadership coming from people that have lived in the government space and have also made the successful transition into the non-government space, because there's so much that we can learn from each other. And what I would also encourage too is, if you don't see a conference near you or a conference that fits the bill for what you're looking for, definitely look into starting one or reaching out to organizations on putting them on. There are a lot of organizations that want to do that, but they need volunteers and they need people to serve on review boards to actually put together really good content. And that's just an opportunity for you to raise your hand and say, hey, I noticed we don't have a conference out here. Post something on LinkedIn. Would anyone would like to partner with me to put something together? And I think it's, just a leadership and volunteer opportunity to really catapult more of that thought leadership into the intelligence space.
Yeah, yeah. To add on that a little bit is sort of that cornerstone of IAs and how we're trained. Usually even if we start off at not good at briefing, we learn to communicate pretty effectively at some point. And it gives you a huge advantage when you go into private sector. Usually, I mean, as an IA, you're forced to brief uh, pretty consistently. I remember like first time I briefed, it was like right after initial training. I had like 100 or 200 pen testers in the room. They knew way more about cybersecurity than I did at the time. And I had to give them a presentation on botnets. So I was a bad presenter and I didn't know anything about the subject matter. I researched it for like a few hours beforehand and they just kind of put me out there. And but even that was a great learning opportunity. You learn how to crash and burn, what that feels like. It's sort of like maybe it's like the Marine Corps mentality where you're broken, you're at your basic element, and then you can only go up from there. A lot of people don't have that experience. So if you like to teach, that's something that can really help. That's a great skill. So like we talked a lot about the technical stuff that I did, but I really also benefited a lot from soft skills, learning to talk to people, anticipating needs of stakeholders. Um, yeah, I used to have my boss like ask me what my assessment was on something that I just saw like 20 minutes ago. And then I'd have to on the spot make an assessment.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I was ready to do that, but I was like, oh, really? Like we're going here. Okay, let's do it. But these are things that not a lot of people have training on, exposure to. So you're kind of like battle hardened, with your experience. So don't take that for granted. Your FBI or your through letter agency background is a huge asset. It's not your golden ticket for everything, but it definitely can give you an edge.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I feel like there are so many experiences that I think people either choose to forget or would rather forget or would not necessarily revisit, where it's like those were your moments that really showed your resilience and your ability to get back to task and improve. And that all happened throughout government. And so sometimes it's helpful to your point, to take a step back and be like, I've been here before, I've done this before, I've come back from it, I've learned a lot. And I actually, all of those things, even if I crashed and burned in so many ways in that past life, I got experiences that I'm going to be talking to a group of people that have never gone through what I went through. And I actually have a lot more guidance and advice and insight and context than I realize if I just like take a moment and say, okay, let's just reflect about where we came from and how far we've come and the totality of those lessons, even if it's seemingly unrelated or what we think not to be entirely relevant. There's actually to that soft skills approach, that's in everything that you did in government beyond
Hmm.
specific casework or working in one office or another. One of the beautiful things about government, and especially the FBI, is there's a multifaceted way to contribute to the mission if you raise your hand or get voluntold enough. And then when you step away from that, you have a much richer experience to lean on. And so I would definitely encourage people to do that self inventory, that year by year, who did I work with? What did I do? Where did I crash and burn? Where did I excel? What did the development space look like for me? And how can I translate that into key accomplishments and skills for a potential employer?
Hmm. Yeah, I knew someone who was really good at KPIs. And then basically they just had this giant spreadsheet and they tracked every single thing they did in government. Went to this, did this, got this training, all the accomplishments. It's like it sounded horrible. Like like
Yeah.
you really pull yourself that you're gonna do that, but
Yeah.
man, that was a great move, honestly. And then figure out maybe you can't say you did exactly this, but you can always like translate that into something that private sector can appreciate. And then you have a running list of things. I mean, look at all of the trainings you have to do when you're onboarded. I don't know how long training is nowadays, but I mean, I had a lot of training just starting out. But yeah, that inventory approach is really smart, and if something always usually aligns.
There's always something. I mean, we've done so many things throughout the intelligence cycle, throughout admin. I know we complained a lot about admin overhead and admin burden. But
Yeah.
honestly, when you are working in the private sector, those KPIs, those requirements are essential to helping you state your case for value and needs in whatever position you land outside of government, where I think the mindset is a little difficult in government because, unless you're in that decision making authority, you're just getting told what you need to do and what success looks like, and what this is the budget, we actually have to spend it. Whereas in the private sector, it's very different.
Yeah, and it depends on where in the private sector too. So I worked at kind of a big company, but then I work at a startup now. It's completely opposite of the bureau. Like not not stovepiped at all. There's lots of freedom, but there's no safety net. So, you can take more risks, get more things done. There's no red tape, but there's lots of opportunities to hang yourself too. Yeah, so it's a very different environment, and it's kind of funny that I kind of went, completely opposite at the end of the day, and I love it here. I love it at Feedly. It's a great place to work. Yeah, I work remote. I've been working remote for, man, like 8 years. It's great. So,
Love that for you. That's the dream right there.
the
um,
dream. Yep.
I definitely appreciated remote work after. I feel like it's really beneficial to be physically co-located with teammates, especially when you're starting out your career.
Yes.
I think that's such a huge experience you need to go through for so many different reasons. It's very similar to if you go away to university and you have the opportunity to live with roommates. Like, definitely an experience that I highly recommend, even if you do it for a short period of time. Um, but yeah, so I want to give you an opportunity if you'd like to share a little bit more about what you're doing with Feedly, or also what's next for you in your exciting career in this field.
And I'm glad you think it's exciting.
It's
But
never
I'm a
dull.
little
Let's
bit.
maybe we can say that it's never a dull moment.
Yeah, so kind of what I'm working on is I released this cool tool that I built. And remember, key talking points before: curiosity, following that, learn to code, and all this stuff. And got my own business, and it's actually an open source project called FlowViz. And I'm presenting at MITRE AttackCon in October on that, which will be cool. And we'll see what happens with it. With Feedly, so it's really cool because we hire people who are usually former, well, there's some former government, former military, but our customer success managers are actually like former threat intel people. Some other companies do this, but we only hire those people. And we're kind of like changing the product a lot this next year. So I help a lot with like, um, we call them like vision maps. It's like you kind of think of like the ultimate ideal state of how the app will be. And I kind of help flesh things out and validate some like, would this be useful for CTI teams for analysts in the field? So yeah, just working a lot with new features on Feedly, with my own projects, and I don't have a lot of time for other things. I got two boys; they keep me pretty busy. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's no master plan, just following my curiosity, and
Did you ever think 9 years ago that you would be here?
no, no. I was very worried 9 years ago, and actually, it was funny. Like, I had a really bad conversation with someone in the FBI, and they just told me, "You're going to be laughing about this one day." Like, I got some words for you, buddy. Um, but I'm not laughing today, but I appreciate where I came from, and it gets better if you're having a rough time in transition. I know a lot of people did with some of the recent stuff that came out. And I think things will work out because to get to where you are, to get selected for the FBI, to make it through this far, you have to have some good qualities about you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, congratulations, first of all all of your success, everything that you're building that's just going to take you forward in so many great ways. And the the flow viz is it VizFlow
FlowViz,
FlowViz
yeah.
FlowViz.
Yep.
I'm so excited to hear about that. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story and also all of your really helpful advice and guidance for our listeners. Um, I gained a lot out of this conversation, and I wish it was like 5 hours longer because I feel like we could talk about this industry and the transition for so long. But really appreciate your time. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience before we close out?
Oh man. Ah, so I think takeaways are really your FBI experience is a really good differentiator when applied correctly. The transition stuff is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Plan early. Um, I already mentioned follow your curiosity, but where it meets the intersection of business need. But yeah, that's about it.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to our listeners for joining. Dave, we love having you as an AIA member and look forward to working with you more and just very much appreciate everything. So thank you very much, and thank you all for joining this episode of The Bluff.